All right, we are live here for this live edition of the New Warehouse podcast, and we have an exciting topic today. One that was quite exciting on LinkedIn, actually, and we are streaming live to both LinkedIn, YouTube, and X today. So, for those that are tuning in and joining us, we appreciate you and thank you for coming in and hopefully joining this discussion. We want to make this very open today. So drop in the comments, where are you tuning in from? Where are you joining us to hear about this discussion and what is going on? And this discussion stemmed from, it stemmed from my experience at Manifest a little bit, but some conversations over time that I've been having around warehouse automation. And I chose to ask the question, is warehouse automation's reputation in danger? And LinkedIn responded, right? And so I decided to bring my friend Parth in here. Parth, if you're not familiar with him, is founder and principal analyst at Whserobotics, which is his own company, his own newsletter that he puts out on a weekly basis focused on the robotics and automation world. Super, super insightful. So highly recommend you subscribe to that and check that out. But he's also director of warehouse design and innovation at Prologis Essentials and has been dealing with automation and robotics for a number of years now. So I'm sure we'll tap into his experience in this discussion today. But he knows his stuff when it comes to this, and we've been friends for a while. We go all the way back to classic podcast hits like "To Bot or Not" on early conversations of the New Warehouse. So happy to get him to join me today. So Parth, welcome in, and how are you, sir?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, we do go back all the way to bots or no bots. But yeah, I think that was a fun one during the COVID times, and I think yeah, thank you for giving a shout out to the newsletter and the my current role at the Prologis Essentials. Yeah, quick intro from my side. I'm been in the warehouse robotics space for a while now. Grew up in the trenches, putting WMS for companies, putting robots in the companies. Became a 3PL operator, and now I'm with Prologis. At Prologis, my primary responsibility is to help our customers go through different uh, challenges or transformation as they take on the journey, and automation is one of those journey. And really excited to chat about why automation is losing the lackluster that it's supposed to have.
Yes, yes. I mean, I thought automation was cool. It's shiny, right? So it's got to be great. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Shout out to Jack Cox joining us here. He says he's a fellow Coke Zero drinker, as Part takes another sip there as well, right? Oh, you guys are always on the same page. That's good to hear. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this, right? So, and I guess I'll preface this with kind of what my takeaway was and where this kind of came from, this idea, right? Well, we've had some discussions, and I think Parth, you and I have had some discussions too as well. But at Manifest, it really kind of like came to a head, I think, where had a couple of discussions, not only with like end users, right, but also the solution providers themselves, talking about, what is happening with failed projects and projects that just haven't quite gone the way that people have thought they would, and, necessarily achieving the ROI or getting the output that they thought they would get from that, or the increased efficiency, et cetera, right? And I think that it's interesting that we are certainly at a time now, right, where I think this, these kind of newer, I guess, advanced automation, advanced robotic solutions have been in the market, have been implemented for long enough where we can kind of say like, okay, it's working or it's not working, right? It's not necessarily so experimental anymore in that regard. So that was kind of like the root of what I had posted there. And the question was really, is warehouse automation's reputation in danger? And as I looked at it, as I saw it, it's okay, well, failed projects, right? People see that now. People are a little hesitant, maybe reluctant to invest on their own or invest again, right? And they're looking at like, if this company can't make it work, like how's it going to work for us, and how do we figure that out? So Parth, I guess what was your kind of initial reaction to that, or what are your thoughts around kind of what my take there?
Um, no, loaded question. I think the way I think about the industry is that we are at a place where we are not looking automation as a cool shiny toy.
Mm,
And to a level, it's good, in my opinion, because I think what has happened during the COVID and right before the COVID, I still remember the early days, like 2017, 2018, when we started really talking about the labor issues, and we were like, automation is needed. Then the COVID came through, and everyone started swelling because of holding the inventory. And at that point, automation again became a very good, exciting problem or exciting tool to solve for the problem statements. And what we missed in this journey, at least in my opinion, is the skill set or the capability on the user end. And what happened that was the customers that really took on I would say, bigger bite than they can chew,
mm,
that had to run into an issue where they're like, oh wow, I can't really make sense of it, and I need to solve for this, and I'm blocking my automation, or my automation is blocking my capability to ship, so I'm not going to do this anymore, and I'm going to stand still. We also had during this, like big firms, big 3PLs have a good, strong innovation teams. And if you think about when you talk to innovation team, their primary responsibility, and I coming from innovation from my team as well, my primary responsibility is to find the good products, a good solution in the market and test them out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. And if you catch me at a place where I'm at Manifest and I'm talking about this specific solution, I probably say, yeah, it didn't work, so I'm going to scrap that project. But
mm,
maybe that was in that time and effort, time that project didn't work, but really there was an opportunity for the innovation team to solve for something else. So my to your question, Kevin, the initial gut reaction is that there is a noise, but there is also an optimism of automation solving things. I was on a call
mm,
recently, as recent as yesterday. I know that automation is still one of the primary levers to help with the throughput, help with the labor cost, help with the unpredictability around the labor challenges that we have. It's thus that we have stopped talking less about it in a way where, because a lot of the conversations are now being overshadowed by, hey, can AI solve for this?
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's and I don't want to say that like okay, my post was like trying to say that like oh, automation is not the way, right? Like I think that it is very much here to stay, right? And it is certainly the way of the future, even like the way of now, right? As you just mentioned, like to be able to approach that and be able to leverage that to deal with some of the issues that we're seeing out there, like some of the labor challenges, some of the real estate challenges, right, and things of that nature. Like it is a necessity to do it, but obviously we're seeing that there's some success with it, but there's also some not so successful projects as well. I think we've all heard the stories, especially on the 3PL side, right? Roll out the bots because the customer's coming through the for the tour, right? And then just put them like back in the corner, right? Or
Yeah.
this didn't quite work out. I mean, there's some pretty large projects most recently,
Yeah.
right, that have
Yeah.
not worked out as planned as well too. So what are you seeing on that end as you look at these projects, as you talk to people in the industry, people that are looking at automation or already have automation? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of like the failed projects to successful projects in the market right now? I mean, I don't know if you had numbers like a ratio maybe, but what does that even kind of like look like? Are you hearing that
I
there's a lot of
um
hesitancy or what's going on?
yeah, so I wish I had a number, because that will really help me, that Prologis knows their buildings really well. I would love to be that
Sure.
position.
Yeah.
I think I think what I can tell you is, I think in last few years the conversation that I've been having is like, when I walk into the room, when we're talking automation, the conversation is about, are we ready for that or not? That's the
Mm,
question they're being asked, right? So I can give you an example as recent as last six months ago. We were walking into a conversation, and the conversation was about like, hey, we are moving pallets in, pallets out,
mm,
and I would not have expected that comment would come from an operations director in a good way, because operations is always focused on the shipping out the volumes, shipping out the pallets, and the operations person said that Parth, I think we are not ready for automation because we do not have a robust WMS, right?
Mm,
That level of education, all the way down to an operations director of a building, tells me now that the education of the foundations for the automation success is being propagated throughout the organization, that an operations director has that understanding that I need to have WMS ready even before I can think about automation. So that gave me an encouraging highlight that the however many years of ups and downs that automation has looked at it, what has really it has helped is that it has started propagating the education piece that, hey, if I need automation, just let me rephrase, when I need automation, I need to have this kind of skill sets or this kind of foundation ready to make it happen. So to your question, I don't have a good ratio, but I have that
mm.
positive outlook, meaning that folks have now started looking at automation more of like, hey, I need to do this. Let's just make sure I have the right stuff that I need to make it right.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of, some of my takeaways too. And certainly a ton of like what we saw in the comments of that post too, right? About people talking about, it's not necessarily like the automation, like the solution itself, it's not necessarily the solution's fault that it didn't quite work out for some people, but it is kind of like that foundational layer there. So I'm curious on that side, like in that scenario, you mentioned that the operations director was recognizing that, like, okay, our WMS is not robust enough, right? Or is not like up to snuff to be able to do these kind of technology advancements and things like that. So when we see, projects that don't quite go the way as planned, or, not necessarily failed, but maybe not just like yielding the results that were expected. I mean, who do you think is really to kind of blame at the end of the day? I mean, is it the solution provider? Is it the integrator or the consultant? Is it that user themselves that decided to go with it? I mean, who really do you see kind of like, taking the blame a little bit here?
You're gonna put it hard for me. I'm gonna make.
Yeah,
I'll get
I mean, not
many
to not
LinkedIn
to like
comments.
not to upset any of your friends or anything like that, but
I think in a good way. I think it's. I wish I had a straight away answer, but I think it's a
Mm,
case by case basis.
mm,
So I'll give you a few examples. Right, one of the examples that again I'm leaving through today, as of today, maybe 5 minutes ago. It's more of like we have an automation, light piece of automation in a warehouse. The challenge we are facing is the installation was not done properly, and that was a couple of months ago. The installation was done, and now we are really ramping up the volume, and that's when we are catching up issues. So
mm,
now we are at a place where we have to go fix some install issues, and it's 2 months into it, so sensitivities around that is really high. So in my challenge in this whole setup, and I'm living this through live right now, is that the way I have to solve for it is pretty much making sure that first make sure that why the install was not done properly, right? And really fix the root cause right away. So we have a team on site who is fixing it right now. But then there is a lesson learned in this case for me is like next going forward, we probably might want to have a hyper support system, looking at really the basic details about the install, not just saying that hey, you can if you can put a pallet in, pallet out, your system is solved, but really looking going down to the as simple as hey, can this if I put negative testing, right? If you think about the software wall, what if I put a bigger pallet than it was supposed to design to? What would happen? Do that kind of negative testing as well when I'm handing over the keys of automation to someone else. And it's more of a project management aspect of it. But again, in this scenario, we are all trying to help solve for the same problem, keep shipping using that automation. The
mm,
challenge is that there was a miss on the install. There was miss. I would say lesson learned is like, hey, when the install is done, let's make sure that we are testing all the things. And now we are 2 months into it. Now we are all living through it. We will get out of it. We have a team on site. Probably end of this week we'll be out of it. But again, it's a lesson that was learned. So going back to who to blame, I wish it was one person that I could have said that, hey, you messed up. It's more of like,
mm,
hey, if we should have thought about these things, And it goes back to like the initial saying that I keep saying is, when we think about automation, again, let's not treat it as a capex purchase. Let's treat it as a muscle that you need to develop, right? The reason Amazon, the reason Walmart are doing so well, for Walmart, I think are 22 DCs now with Symbiotic, right? Which is
Mhm.
great, which is a great stat if you think about it. But it's not a capex purchase that they thought about it. It was more of like, hey, we will need to have them to be successful for our supply chain. We need to develop a teams around that. And uh, the way I think about it, like when we start treating automation as something like a capability rather than a capex, is when we change the real conversation. Just because when you think about from a capability perspective, now you're thinking from a organizational perspective, you're thinking about tech readiness. You think about maintenance teams and all of those different things rather than say, hey, can I get an ROI of 2.5 years? Great, you can get an ROI for 2.5 years on the deck because the solution works, the analysis works great, but there is no guarantee that when it goes to implementation 2 years after, if there is still 2.5 year of ROI checked or validated at any point.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think that's a very interesting, perspective and way to look at it, right? Because I think when you think about it as the capex, right, as you're saying, like that's where, I think that's where people get hung up on like the financial ROI, right, and like defining that as like the success. So I mean, if you move it towards more of just a capability, right, and that kind of muscle, as you refer to it, right? I mean, what do you think? I mean, how should people really be like defining success of automation? Like, do you think that is, maybe part of the issue too, where people are looking at it just strictly from like a financial numbers benefit? And are there some other factors in there that people should think more when it comes to like what is successful automation rollout look like, or a project long term?
To me, in my simple opinion, is operators are paid to ship orders, not to buy new technology. So,
Mhm.
in that opinion, with that opinion, my strongest belief is that automation should help you keep shipping, and keep shipping at a numbers that you expect when you purchase a system or when you are thinking to deploy the system. So, for success criteria for me, when it thinks about automation, is if I'm able to keep shipping for the numbers that I was designed to design the building, I'm doing well. Of course,
Mhm.
at that point, when I was making the business case for the deployment, I was looking at the growth trends, I was looking at the labor rates, I was looking at the investment that I will have to do, investment in integration of the IT integration, investment in the building integration. I was looking at all those variables to make a business case. My business case came out to be, let's say, 2.5 years. And now 2.5 years business case gets me the automation that I wanted. The
Mhm.
success of automation is not just like, hey, installing the automation, is more like after 2.5 years, when the ROI is paid back, am I still using that to ship my customer orders out of that building?
Mhm.
Because that's when the real profit margins start building up, right? Because my 2.5 year was just getting my paybacks. Now I'm really looking to start looking at the investment that will pay for my cost efficiencies, labor efficiency, throughput efficiencies, where start its compounding. So if you ask me simple question, if I am the SVP of supply chain for for a grocer or for a big company, the automation makes sense. The success of automation is, am I still using beyond my ROI period to keep shipping the volume that I'm supposed to ship?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting to hear that too, because I think that, there's some situations, right? Certainly that we see where, not is it just about like, increasing profitability, right? Or the efficiency or things like that. It's like almost necessity in some markets. Like I've heard where people are like, we're not necessarily care about the ROI. It's just that like, we cannot get the people to
Yep.
come in and do this. So like we have to figure out an alternative solution and just make that happen. So I think there's kind of different layers of like what success can look like. Like maybe, it's the the math, so to speak, is not necessarily mathing exactly to how you expect, but then there's like those kind of tangential benefits as well that people are, necessarily going after to be able to solve some of the other challenges in between that don't necessarily, show up on the spreadsheet or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. So
So
yeah, go ahead.
100%. And I think to your point about the folks not able to find folks, I have actually a customer right now who is in a remote part of one of the states in East Coast,
Mm,
and they started there just because they started as as a small company. They're now a big distribution player, and the biggest challenge they have is that they know that the town population is aging. There is no big towns around them, and they will run into a problem where they will run out of labor force, and
mm,
they cannot move because they are kind of like the lifeline of that town, right? So,
oh,
and
wow.
the owners live there. It's a good, decent distribution business. So there is no way that they're going to close the shop and go somewhere else. But at the same time, the challenge they have is the population is aging population, a little bit more skill sets they need, and they don't have folks to come in. So they are trying to figure out how can automation really help them solve for that, because they know that there is a horizon of 5 to 7 years after which it's a survival instinct. Like, can we survive here or not?
Yeah, interesting, and, I mean, a lot of pressure there, lifeblood of the
Yeah,
town, right? I mean,
yeah,
I think that and that's a great example too, right? I mean, you have a small business, and now all of a sudden it's scaling and growing, right? And then it's like, okay, well, do we even have the resources around us to support us, and what are the options there? So I think that's a really great example. Happy you shared that. So in the discussion there that was under the post as well, there was a lot of people commenting kind of about the integration piece, right? So, saying that, like, well, if the integration isn't good and it's not working with the systems that you have in place already, maybe even like working with the people aspect too, and in some situations, that could be the issue. So in your experience, when we look at the integration side of things, like, where do things on the integration side typically go wrong, and what are people maybe misstepping in that area?
I can put a lecture on this one. So I think
Go ahead,
when
lecture
we
us. Yeah.
integration is a very again funny term, just because I think when we think about integration, we only talk about IT integration, but there is an
Mm,
also building integration conversation that is happening. Uh, Sometimes it's a organizational that's happening as well. I'm sorry, just a second. What is this?
yeah. Oh, you good? You're still there.
Sorry, my bad. My Can you still
Oh, we don't hear you.
how about now?
Oh,
Sorry for
yes, you're
that.
back. You're back. You're back.
Okay, sorry for that. Um, yeah, so integration is people integration, building integration, and IT integration. I think when I think about, I start with basic IT integration. The challenge with IT integration usually has been is that when this kind of projects, specifically automation projects, are either driven by the engineering team or the operations team. And when they think about engineering and operations team, they are really focused on, hey, this is my pain point, this is I'm going to solve, this is going to keep doing it. And when it comes to the IT side of it, what happens is, and again, I would say this is something I coach my customers a lot, that don't put IT on the back burner where like, hey, we'll reach to them when we have really figured out this right solution fit. I think that's
Mhm.
too late by then, just because when you have already found the solution fit, a lot of concrete has been poured into it. A lot of stories from a leadership has already been made that, hey, we are looking for X solution, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So there's no coming back out of it if there was an IT hiccup that was not identified before. So my suggestion is always that IT should be one of the key stakeholders when you are actually started looking at the solution fit for your automation. So that way your integration challenges or integration conversation becomes more of a like a check gatekeeper, if you will, rather than something that we have to do. So my suggestion to most of my customers is like, hey, put IT integration conversation as a gatekeeper, that hey, you got to spend a couple of hours with my IT team, then only you can go to the next round, right? So let's say you
Mm.
go to the RFP, you select two or three folks, and now at that point, you got to have each one of them have a conversation with the IT directors, IT team, do a light map integration mapping so you know how much effort from the company's perspective the time and effort will go into it. Once you understand that, you use that as one of the criterias for your selection, because at the end, if you don't do that, my biggest worry is that you are at the back burner of it. And as someone who was championing on the user side to build this automation, he or she is at the mercy of the IT team. And IT team, let's be honest, they have 10 other things that they're solving for.
Sure.
Right. So priorities always fall down. And that's where I have seen the biggest challenges. And I was personally an example of that. I think in my past, it was not a new install, but it was an existing install, and we had challenges with the IT. We had challenges with the integration between the automation system that I had and the WMS system we had and the WES system we had. And it was really hard in the beginning to really make, first of all, problem statement definition that, hey, what is problem, what are we trying to solve, because I was looking at three different places, and then really getting buy-in from the IT leadership to dedicate someone to solve for that. And honestly, it took a couple of senior leadership calls to get me that support, because now, it was not because they didn't want it to give it, because they had 10 other priorities they were solving for, and this was not that big of a fire until it became that big of a fire.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, sorry, just one last on the integration piece. I think one of the
Sure.
things that we might run into going forward as well is the building integration piece, and something that we really are focusing on this year from Prologis side. I think with the data center coming up, the power has been a struggle.
Mm.
The power clearly creates a struggle from a building perspective. So what we have started doing in our analysis is like, hey, we of course do the organizational readiness, we do the solution fit and readiness. We started doing the building readiness as well, where we want to go out to the building, do actually, let's say, floor flatness. Again, not every solution needs the complete floor flatness, but there is still some level of floor flatness is needed for
Mm.
AMRs, AGVs, and forklifts, autonomous forklifts to drive. There is an electrical component to it, like where should my power drop? Should I put it like 100 feet away, or should I put it closer? How much within the building? What is my amps that is allocated to me? Which is it enough? Is it not enough? Even the internet access. Sometimes, specifically with the automation, again, a live example that I'm living through right now is the internet connectivity can also become a problem, because a lot of metal, and if you do not have a right AP setup, you probably run into each other interference and all of those things. So that's building readiness is another challenge that, from integration perspective, we have to look into. I can give you another example. As early as last yesterday, there are, with the new automation system, there are
Mhm.
conversation about how can we make sure that building is designed in a way that new automation can easily get into it, rather than retrofitting the brownfield building with this brand new automation, right? So that's also a new
Mm.
conversation happening, where many big players in the market are thinking, how about we just go out and build a new building and see if we can figure out an automation friendly building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I've had some conversations around that too, especially around like the power load and things, right? That the older building, right? Like having to bring in a lot more of these solutions and things like that obviously takes more power to make sure that they are running and things like that. And how do we make sure we put that in place? So, I mean, I'm curious there because you kind of touched on a lot about like the foundation, right? And making sure like the building is ready, making sure the teams are aligned, and there's like communication between those teams. So I'm curious, sometimes I guess it sounds like maybe if the project doesn't go quite as planned, right? Maybe there's cracks in that foundation, so to speak, right? And the setup was not that right before we decided to move into automation. So what is your advice around that? Like, how do you decide, or how do you maybe like check off the boxes and understand like, okay, well, we've done the foundational part like internally, and now we are ready for automation and we are setting ourselves up internally for success. What does that look like?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and actually, a couple of years ago, I felt like I made a post on something like this as well. I think I'm a believer that when we are thinking about automation as a capability, you need an executive buy-in.
Mm,
And to have an executive buy-in, you need someone who sits as an executive level or a senior leadership level. And that individual should have multiple, it can be a matrix organization, but he or she should have a line of sight into engineering, IT, maintenance, operations. This individual will be able to help become that capability from an automation perspective. So if you have that individual in your organization or that kind of structure, I think they bring that leadership, they bring that playbooks, if you will, to your
mm,
organization to make those things happen. So if you think about what all we talked today, we talked about WMS readiness, we talked about building readiness, we talked about solution fit, we talked about why projects fail, why we are losing the the shiny object syndrome. All, in my opinion, come back to like, hey, if I was on the user side, how can I have someone at a leadership level who can tie all of these things together? So I'm a big believer that I think GXO had a chief automation role in past. I think that was a great
yeah.
role. I think that, and my claim to fame, if you will, is like I made that post about like, hey, we should have someone like that role in a big firm, and I think 6 months later or 7 months later, we had a role which was great. Uh,
Mm,
that being said, I think if you have a chief person or a senior leader, what he or she will bring is he or she will bring that becomes a capability now. He or she is gonna go to the room and say, chief financial officer, hey guys, we got to do this automation. This is the team is gonna do it. We are looking at CPO of this. We are gonna become a CPO of this. Right? That's
mm,
such conversation that this chief automation officer, chief robots officer, whatever you want to call it, SVP
mm,
of robotics, whatever you call it. But I think that individual now becomes the owner of this capability. Like how we have a financial owner, which is CFO, chief supply chain owner, chief supply chain officer, supply chain owner. We don't have a robotics owner or an automation owner. And that's
mm.
when we see this like, hey, everyone is leaning in my opinion, at that point. And when everyone is leaning in, and you probably know this, Kevin, from your past, is like if it's everyone's inventory, it's no one's inventory,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's everyone's problem, no one's problem, and that's kind of happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of like what Jack is asking here a little bit, right? He says, what about clear ownership in an implementation? Seems similar to what you're calling out, multiple owners across multiple facets and no clear accountability. What role do you think is best equipped for this in a matrixed environment? So I mean, I guess that's kind of along the lines like, okay, we don't have a chief automation officer, we don't have an SVP of robotics that's necessarily focused on that. If we are in that position, and you talked about, I guess, bringing the departments together, making sure IT is involved and things like that. But who do you think, in that situation? I mean, who do you designate as like the owner that is, making sure that this is going through?
Ooh, I wish I had a good answer, but I can only say
Yeah.
from my experience. I think in my experience, and I put myself in one of the things that I always do is like I'm going to put myself in those shoes. If I'm in an organization and I don't have that kind of level, I'm going to task my team probably will be an industrial engineering team to take on that
Mm,
ownership. That doesn't mean that every organization should take on that, but at least if it was me, I would have an industrial engineering team probably under me, and at that point, I would have taken the ownership of that robots from, because as an industrial engineering team, I already took care of. I already am responsible again based on my past experience, and again,
mhm,
everyone is different. I'm already taking care of the maintenance department. I'm already communicating to the operations folks in the language they understand. I understand the IT world, I understand the WMS world. All I have to do is like now bring all this together in that matrix org and say, hey guys, for this project, I'm the project leader, and let you all have to work with me on this project for this project success, and for this next 6 months we are a team.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's good advice there on trying to figure that out, because I think that there's still right? I mean, there's still very low penetration in the general market when it comes to automation and robotics, right? So, there's the idea, right? Obviously, great idea, right? To have somebody that is like, all right, just owning automation or robotics like within the organization as a whole. But there's still a ton of organizations that are like, not at that point yet, like where they're still just
Yep.
going to be like, all right, we're just going to get into automation. We're just going to get into robotics now and try and figure that out. So I'm curious for, for those people that maybe, have only kind of lightly dabbled in automation, or they're just about to do that, but they're seeing some of the news out there on, some of the projects that have not quite panned out, or maybe they're talking to peers that didn't have like the best experience exploring some of this, and maybe have some skepticism now. And that's kind of like, I think where my, my question comes in about the reputation of warehouse automation, right? I mean, what would you say to them, like, to make them not skeptical? Like, what should they, what advice would you give them to, not delay necessarily, but not let like other projects influence them, or make them maybe take like a little step back?
Um, and I'm going to give you a controversial answer right now, Kevin. I think
Oh, okay.
maybe that's you might want don't want to look at automation. Like maybe that's the starting point, right? Where
Okay.
maybe for the folks who are really trying to figure out how to bring every warehouse has a pain point. Every warehouse will have a problem statement. Let's go back to the problem statement that you're having, and maybe the right solution for that is not automation. Maybe that's uh, some AI tool, or maybe that's just fixing the internet connectivity. Right? Sometimes that could be as simple as that, or sometimes it's like, hey, I need a right organizational leader who is always on the floor, or she is always on the floor and making sure the operate management practices are being taken care of it. So we want to avoid putting finding, I would say, a problem to a solution, sorry, a solution, and then go back and find a problem. Instead of, it should be the other way, we find a problem and then go find a solution. So folks who are thinking about automation, I think my challenge in a counter argument to that would be like, hey, what are you trying to solve for?
Mm,
If they say, my part, I'm really trying to solve for labor throughput. Great. Let's talk about labor. What are you doing today and how are you doing today? Maybe you don't have a WMS that can do a better algorithm picking, right? A better pick strategy around that. Maybe that's where your low hanging fruit comes in. Like maybe WMS that you have does doing better picking methodologies before you even think about automation. Because sometimes the the throughput UPH gains, you might be better at using a WMS even before think about robotics. Right? For example, if you're doing your SLUs, or sorry, SLSUs, single line, single unit orders, you really probably might not need a strong automation. All you need is a great put wall system, right?
mm,
Bring
yeah.
all the batch orders, bring all your Justin Bieber Crocs to a put wall, and start sorting all your sorting all your shoes. Maybe, and that's where my question comes in. Like maybe automation is an answer, but let's make sure you understand the problem statement before you go into the automation, because that has been the challenge in past, where we have seen a lot of the answers that we have seen in the market is like, hey, it didn't work, it was not ready. Maybe the question we should be asking, like, hey, what did you look at other solutions before you talk
Mm,
about the problem? And today, as of today, I'm also like, when I get into my conversations with customers, I'm like, hey, yes, but I really need to solve for this. I'm like, great. Wha- what is driving that problem? What are you
mhm,
seeing that is creating that problem? And those are the answers that I'm coming back to it. So again, the answer could be no automation today. Maybe it's a 5 year down the drain or 2 year down the drain. But going back to that question is going to be more important than thinking, hey, are we ready for automation or not?
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, right? Because automation is not the end all be all. Like there's tons of other solutions out there. Like you said, you mentioned the put wall, or maybe it's even just, doing a different type of like handheld scanner or something like that, or, like, those types of things to be able to put that in place, like before you actually look at these larger, scale automation solutions, or robotics in general. And we're coming up on like the hot time for that right now. I mean, Logimat is just kind of, I think, wrapping up, right, this past week, right? And there's some interesting news coming out of there, but then we're also coming up on Modex now in the next 3 weeks as well. So there's going to be a ton of automation, ton of robotics, and a bunch of people's faces right down there in Atlanta. So how would you advise people, or guide them to kind of navigate the solutions that we see out there?
You'll be drinking from a firehouse, so we better be ready for that. That's what I'll say.
Sure, yeah.
uh, I think my advice is pretty much standard advice. Like, hey, let's make sure that you understand the problem statement you're trying to solve for. Don't go with an expectation that I will look at everything and then figure out. What will have end up happening is that you will look at everything, and once you come back, you won't be able to action on it. So
Mm,
I'm an advocate of going with an understanding of validating it rather than just learning about it. And let's be honest, every person who is in that room, or every company that who is in that room, will have a website, right?
mhm.
You can easily go on there, start look, and Modex does a great job of giving you a lot of information who is exhibiting.
Yeah.
Start looking at problem statements, start looking at their what are they trying to solve for, and then start validating it. And sometimes that's where I think one of the things that I did last year, and again, I'm trying to be humble about it, but I'm not going to be humble about it. The tours, the curated tours about it, I think that's one of the things that can really help you look at the problem statements directly rather than going directly with anyone else. So again, be prepared. Don't go with an expectation that you have to you are going to learn. Be Go with an
Mhm.
expectation to be. I'm not see so many awesome demos. That doesn't mean that it will work in a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't get lost in the coolness and the shiny and the sexy, right? And make sure
Yeah.
you stick to, like, all right, what are my actual challenges right now, and what do I need to solve for? And like, all right, well,
Yeah.
that was cool looking. Like, let me put that in the back of my head, maybe for the future potentially. But I think that's great advice there as well. So now, if we kind of look towards the future, right, and we think about, obviously a lot of these automation robotics solutions, especially with AI involved now too, as well, it's like they're constantly iterating, like they're constantly advancing, evolving. So, I mean, do you think that we are getting to a point where, some of these challenges that we discussed today, like, are going to start to go away because the education is going to start to increase more as well, and people are going to be more aware of how to approach these projects, or because the technology keeps advancing so rapidly that we're just going to kind of continue in this cycle a little bit?
Great question. What's going to happen is, in my opinion, the AI conversation is going to take over a lot of these
Mm,
conversations nowadays. Uh, and AI has a potential. Let's be honest. It's we have seen the impacts already. So it has the potential. The answer it would be that things will evolve. Things will start evolving. But I go back to that example of Amazon, right? Amazon invested in
mm,
Kiva 2013, right? And that technology is still being used. Of course, it has upgraded, improved, and doing much better than what it was supposed to do. Amazon realized that the biggest problem they are trying to solve is unproductive travel time. If you solve for that unproductive travel time using a solution that can stand at least a decade of iterations that are happening in the industry, then I think that
mm,
we have made a good investment. So knowing the problem statement that you're trying to solve and going for an automation solution that can really solve for it, that's what you need right now, because what comes next is beyond anyone's control. Let's be honest, no one can predict the future. But what we can do today is like, I have this problem statement. I looked at five different providers. I created the best business case. I looked at my operational readiness. I'm ready to do this. And based on these five use cases, I think this is the right solution for me. I'm going to implement it, because whatever comes next, I'm not sure, but I have done enough due diligence on my end that I'm confident that this will stand the time test of time, like how the Amazon Kivas work. So changes are going to come, changes will keep coming. If your problem statement is only solved by automation, then I don't see a place where you will get away from the automation. But if your problem statement can be solved by multiple things, that's when you will start going to that limbo. Is it AI problem solving, or is it organizational? Is it automation kind of thing?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, good thoughts there. And I think, it'd be interesting to see, and obviously, it's super exciting being in the space because we get to see kind of all this evolution and things like that. But then, obviously for the end user, I feel for them because it's a ton to navigate, right? And trying to figure out, like,
Yes,
as
for
you
sure.
mentioned, like go to Modex, you're drinking from the fire hose essentially with like this solution, that solution, right? This robot moving over here, this shuttle system, this ASRS, like all these different things happening. So how do we kind of land on what is the right one for us and figure out like what is our path, right? Is certainly complicated there. So you'll be down at Modex, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's where you live, right? Basically, that's your
Yes, that's
backyard, right?
that's my
Right.
backyard.
So
Yeah, that's my backyard.
yeah. So if people want to connect with you or learn more from you and appreciate what you've shared here today, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn. I would say content creator nowadays, if you will. But yeah, LinkedIn is my place to be. I'm always live there. I'm not live, but I'm always connected there. So please reach out on LinkedIn.
Yes, absolutely. And you also have a great newsletter too as well, which
Yeah.
comes out like every week. I think it comes out every Sunday, right? I
Sunday.
get it,
Yeah,
right?
Sunday
So
7 p.m. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that and like how people can get subscribed to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, WHSE robotics.com, and it's my newsletter. Basically, what I do try to do is like just I see a lot of things in the industry, and it's my place to share my thoughts about what I'm seeing in the industry. Again, pretty much just sharing what I learned. And as I think about the industry, one of the key things that I'm always very supportive of is like education piece. Any transformation starts with education, and that's what my goal is with that website and that newsletter. Just educate. There is nothing else coming out of that. Just trying to educate the industry on, hey, there are ups and downs in robotics, there are ups and downs in implementations, that this is how you think about it, playbooks, uh, thought processes and stuff like that on that one.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm a subscriber. I read every week, mostly on
Thank you.
Sundays. Sometimes it takes me
Yep.
maybe a week to catch up, but always super thoughtful writings in there, and definitely recommend subscribing to that. So Parth, thank you so much for joining me today, and continuing this discussion about warehouse automation's reputation. And thank you to everybody that tuned in today as well and dropped some comments. Shout out to Jack over there as well. Appreciate your input, sir. And if you want to learn more about the new warehouse or check out the latest podcast episodes, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to us on LinkedIn. And also check out thenewwarehouse.com as well. And if you want to hear more from Parth, he's been on a couple times too as well. You can search in the podcast archives there to find out some of his earlier thoughts too as well. So really appreciate the time today, Parth, and hope everybody listening has a great day. And we'll see you at thenewwarehouse.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. Appreciate it.